Tonight, Donald Trump takes aim at Canada again, this time on the world stage.
We don't need them to make our cars. We don't need their lumber. We don't need their oil and gas.
A new swipe from the new U.S. president as he takes his tariff threat to a global audience. The race to replace Justin Trudeau now closer to being locked in. The endorsements now rolling in.
I've known him and I trust him.
She's a fierce defender of Canada.
At issue on who's backing who and what to watch for next. And a new glimpse inside the Toronto party turned brazen gang shootout.
They don't have a care in the world. It's like they don't expect that they're going to get caught with this.
The video just released by investigators.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. Donald Trump has taken his fight with Canada to the international stage, both demanding respect and in no uncertain terms, pushing forward with his tariff threat. In front of some of the world's top business and political leaders, Trump not only threatened those tariffs, but began rattling off some of Canada's top exports one by one, then saying the U.S. doesn't need any of them. Paul Hunter now with the American president's amped up warnings.
For Donald Trump, speaking to the World Economic Forum by video link, his get it done list for global business and government leaders was lengthy, forceful,
Say you can always become a state.
and more than a few times aimed at Canada.
Canada has been very tough to deal with over the years. And it's
His reiteration of tariff threats against Canada said to have brought gasps in the crowd, seeming to suggest if Canada doesn't do his bidding, the U.S. could simply stop buying.
We don't need them to make our cars, and they make a lot of them. We don't need their lumber because we have our own forests, et cetera, et cetera. We don't need their oil and gas. We have more than anybody.
In Ottawa, the Prime Minister, again, on tariffs.
Our efforts are first and foremost to make sure that tariffs don't come on Canada. It would be bad for Canada, yes, but it would also be bad for American consumers.
But Trump was just getting started, taking another shot at Canada and all NATO countries with a new demand to now massively step up spending on defense.
I'm also going to ask all NATO nations to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP, which is what it should have been years ago.
And on the threat of tariffs, that too was expanded.
My message to every business in the world is very simple. Come make your product in America, and we will give you among the lowest taxes of any nation on earth. But if you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff.
And there's more. He called for oil prices and interest rates to drop, suggested talks with Russia could reduce nuclear weaponry worldwide, and said he'll be asking Saudi Arabia to invest $1 trillion in the U.S.
That's a good one. Birthright.
But back in the U.S., a setback for Trump. That executive order he signed, ending so-called birthright citizenship in America, now blocked by a judge in Washington state who called it blatantly unconstitutional. And very soon after that ruling, Donald Trump made clear he'll appeal it.
And Paul, Trump kept up a pretty frantic pace today, signing even more executive orders.
That he did, Adrian, a number of them. One of them of curious note, get this, it declassifies U.S. government documents regarding the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. As Trump put it after signing that executive order, everything will be revealed.
All right, Paul Hunter in Washington for us tonight. All right, next, let's bring in CBC News Chief Political Correspondent Rosemary Barton. So, Rosie, we've heard the Prime Minister's comments, but it seems there's a lot more work being done behind closed doors.
Yeah, there sure is, Adrian. The government is ready to respond and react to whatever Donald Trump actually does, because remember, he hasn't done it yet. And there's some comfort, I think, in that for officials. The word whiplash has been used to describe what the Canadian government is dealing with right now. So preparing retaliation if necessary, escalating a response when needed, but also, again, trying to make the case that Canada has the things the United States wants. Oil, critical minerals, energy, in spite of what the president said today. And Canada can help the United States achieve its goals. The one thing they don't want to do, the government doesn't want to do, is respond to everything Trump says. So they're going to pick their spots.
Okay. And Rosie, while there is internal prep, it seems that the ministers just keep hitting more snags.
Yeah, one of the big challenges right now is that Trump's cabinet secretaries haven't been confirmed, with the exception of the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. So Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly talked to him for like 30 minutes last night, did raise the tariff issue again with him directly, and she's going to meet with Rubio next week. But other ministers can't have those official conversations with their U.S. counterparts yet because they haven't been confirmed. So that will happen in the coming days and weeks. And then at least the government will have a channel of communication. The Canada-U.S. relationship is really the primary focus of what Justin Trudeau will be doing in his last weeks as Prime Minister.
All right, CBC News Chief Political Correspondent Rosie Barton in Ottawa. And Rosie will be back with the At Issue crew in about 20 minutes to take a closer look at how Canada is preparing for Trump's continued tariff threat. Now, while Trudeau works to avoid a trade war, there is movement when it comes to the future of the Liberal Party. These are the 7 contenders who say they have submitted their nomination packages, clearing the first hurdle in the fight to become the new leader, the winner also becoming Canada's 24th Prime Minister, and soon after, the face of the party as it heads into the next federal election. Among those 7 candidates, there are 2 clear frontrunners. Ashley Burke now with how they're trying to shore up support and who appears to have the edge right now.
Okay. Mark Carney making a big entrance near Parliament Hill.
We can put this economy back on track as a team.
Flanked by Liberal ministers and other MPs heading into a private event to rally more support for his bid to replace Justin Trudeau.
What would you say to someone who says being Prime Minister is not an entry-level job?
I've had many jobs. I've had many jobs where I came in at the top. I came in at the top of the Bank of England, Bank of Canada, in terms of the United Nations and climate change.
Carney, who has never been elected to public office, has already won major endorsements.
I've been following his career for many years. We've worked together at the United Nations together, so I've known him and I trust him and I have great faith in his abilities.
More than 10 cabinet ministers backing him, including some powerful organizers.
When it comes to Mr. Carney, I have a lot of respect, and I've endorsed him, and I've sent a clear message to my base and to my organizers and to my volunteers to send a signal.
More MPs so far picking Carney over their longtime Liberal colleague and former Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland.
I'm really glad to be here today to be meeting with my caucus colleagues. I am so grateful to the colleagues who have been supporting me.
Freeland's supporters say her record speaks for itself.
This is somebody who in her private life was a journalist and a managing editor, took on Putin.
Chrystia Freeland is the best person to take on Donald Trump. She's a fierce defender of Canada.
House Leader Karina Gould also vying for the country's top job with a grassroots approach targeting young Liberals.
We have to be honest about the fact that Canadians have lost trust in our party. And part of it is because I don't think we responded to the issues that they were telling us mattered to them.
Both Gould and Freeland have really been trying to distance themselves from Trudeau and their government's unpopular policies. The latest, Freeland breaking away from changes to the capital gains tax, which she introduced when she was finance minister and continuously defended. Freeland also said she'd scrap the carbon tax if elected.
And Ashley, CBC News is tracking MP endorsements. How's that support looking right now?
Adrian, so far, almost 40 MPs support Mark Carney. About 25 are backing Freeland, including 5 ministers, and 2 MPs are endorsing Gould. Now, it will take the party some time to approve candidates, and with only 6 weeks left in this condensed race, contenders only have until next week to sign up new members.
Ashley Burke in Ottawa. CBC News has learned voters in Ontario could be heading to the polls by the end of next month. According to a senior source in the province's Progressive Conservative Party, Doug Ford is planning to call an election next Wednesday after a super caucus meeting to be held this weekend. That would mean voters could go to the polls on February 27th. Ford has been hinting at an early election for a while now, saying he needs a new mandate to fight against those potential U.S. tariffs. Well, police in Toronto are announcing 14 more arrests in a shocking gun battle we first told you about months ago. Through newly released video, Thomas Dagg brings us into the moment a party turned into a shootout.
Taking cover behind a door, a gunman opens fire toward a Toronto sidewalk. Part of a brazen shootout in public last November, now leading to 14 more arrests.
It is nothing short of a miracle that no one was injured or killed.
Investigators releasing new video from a music studio hosting a birthday party right before that gunfight. One suspect is seen with what look like 2 assault-style rifles in his lap. Another handling the type of high-capacity magazine that's banned in Canada.
They don't have a care in the world. It's like they don't expect that they're going to get caught with this.
CBC News was the first to obtain and broadcast this video with alleged gang members waving guns in the air, the youngest only 16 years old.
Police suspect a rival gang spotted that video on social media, then drove here armed with handguns and opened fire at that recording studio up on the 2nd floor.
The ensuing shootout leaving bullet holes all over, even through the windshield of this unmarked police car.
This is happening across the city, right? There are people that are getting together that have guns, that everyone's showing up practically with a gun.
Officers swarmed the area that night with 17 suspects charged so far, about half arrested while out on bail. This man spotted stashing a weapon under the couch. In all, police seized 16 illegal guns that they say were smuggled from the U.S. And these suspects, each facing firearms charges, are still wanted.
Gun violence has, been going up. There's more guns that are coming over across the border. It's definitely something that needs to be addressed.
In a city suffering through what police call escalating gun crime, this may just be a glimpse of the crisis. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
The 18-year-old who stabbed 3 children to death in England at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class has now been sentenced to more than 50 years behind bars. The judge said Axel Rudakabana, quote, wanted to try and carry out mass murder. He noted that while he could not impose a life sentence without parole, because the offender was only 17 at the time, it is unlikely Rudakabana will ever be released. The attack set off days of anti-immigrant rioting last summer after misinformation spread that the accused was an asylum seeker. Well, fire warnings are in effect tonight across much of Southern California, with one particular threat growing fast. It's been less than 48 hours since a Hughes fire north of LA exploded in size as winds picked up. Remember, responders are still hard at work to contain those other major fires still burning closer to the city. Cam McIntosh now with the race to control the flames.
Just when it all seemed to be getting under control, again, more of the landscape around Los Angeles burns. This fire threatening the pricey neighborhood of Bel Air. Well north of LA, the Hughes fire is engulfing mountainsides. All of it putting at least another 55,000 people under evacuation orders or warnings. Residents say it came up fast.
Basically, you're kind of just sitting in the middle of a real powder keg, so to speak. And really, the only thing you can really do is put a lot of confidence in the LA County Fire Department.
It comes just after 2 other massive fires destroyed thousands of homes and buildings, leveling entire neighborhoods. Thousands have lost their home. The latest fires are in less populated areas, but risk spreading, driven by high winds in drought and low humidity. For the first time in months, forecasts call for rain. But that could bring another problem: mudslides on fire-compromised slopes. Crews are preparing.
Mudslides are going to be an issue for everybody throughout LA County, but we're as prepared as we can be for this type of thing.
At least 28 people are dead. The fires may be the costliest in U.S. history. If scenes like this aren't bad enough, there's the politics. The new president, Donald Trump, letting California know he'd like the federal government to get out of disaster aid, telling Fox News,
"I'd rather see the states take care of their own problems."
But with all the crew and equipment, this is very much a national and international effort, involving thousands of personnel, including Canadians. Authorities say they can handle what's coming.
The situation that we're in today is much different than the situation we were in 16 days ago.
Still, it will take work. The flames and wind carry both a clear risk and message. It's not over yet. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The Supreme Court of Canada has agreed to hear a challenge against Quebec's secularism law. Known as Bill 21, the provincial legislation bans some public workers from wearing religious symbols while on the job. The law was first passed in 2019, resulting in numerous protests and 2 failed court challenges in Quebec. New research out tonight shows how getting stronger and healthier before surgery can benefit both patients and the healthcare system. Mike Crawley explains why.
Let's do 2 more.
It might look like the kind of physical rehab that's done after surgery.
Squeeze the shoulder blades back here.
But this is actually prehab, happening before Paul Kennedy's open heart surgery next month.
The walking was the first thing. Then there were stretching exercises for upper body.
Feel the muscles in the hips.
The former CBC radio host has been doing prehab exercises for several months.
My endurance is infinitely better than it was. Everything's better. I'm in better shape for the operation.
We're going to push forward. Perfect. And we'll do that 5 times as well.
The idea is patients need to get physically prepared for surgery like it's a long-distance run.
So having surgery is stressful on your body, and I don't know anybody who'd decide to go out next weekend, run a half marathon without doing any prep.
Dr. Dan McIsaac's research reveals some fresh data of how prehab regimes benefit surgical patients.
If they exercise more before surgery, they can have a massive reduction in the likelihood they're going to have a complication like a heart attack or pneumonia after surgery.
The study of more than 15,000 Canadians finds a 40 to 50% reduction in surgical complications and on average 1 fewer day spent recovering in hospital. Trends that are good not just for patients, but also for the health system.
$1 in the investment in the prehab might actually end up with a greater amount of saving at the end.
The number of Canadian hospitals making prehab available to surgical patients is growing.
We're trying to target those who are most likely to benefit, and those tend to be those who are frail or have a complex surgery with a high risk of complication.
The next step in research, figuring out which prehab programs bring the greatest benefit. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Pet owners hoping to find cheaper drugs at pharmacies are hitting a roadblock.
Weave, go buddy, go!
The Fifth Estate investigates the fight over where you get your pet medicine.
I really felt I was bullied.
Emilia Pérez leads the Oscar nominations, but not everyone is thrilled.
This is some Speedy Gonzalez level racism going on in this movie.
Oh no, don't eat my cookies. It's my husband's birthday.
And the porch thief hungry for sugar.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
We're back in 2. Well, this is surely a sign of the grip winter has right now on the Great Lakes region. The U.S. Coast Guard had to send an icebreaker to free this freighter after it became stuck in thick ice on Lake Erie. It spent much of yesterday and today immobilized, but the Coast Guard says the crew was safe. Well, tonight, the Fifth Estate is digging into why pet medication isn't more readily available. Some pharmacists say there is a cheaper alternative to the vet. Stephen D'Souza tells us why and what pet owners need to know.
Weave, go buddy, go!
Grace Frankel knows these are precious moments with Finnegan. 2 years ago, she almost lost the Australian Shepherd she trains at her home in Manitoba.
He'd have a seizure, and then he'd have another and another.
Good boy.
Her quick thinking helped save his life.
So he probably should have died on that table that day.
As a clinical pharmacist, she knew about a human medication her veterinarian did not.
Because I had those connections that I'm forever grateful for, we were able to save him.
Right now, unlike the U.S. and other countries, Canadians can't easily access more pet medications from a pharmacist. A joint CBC Radio-Canada investigation found some veterinary regulators, drug companies, and distributors are shutting out pharmacists.
I really felt I was bullied.
Wendy Choi is one of those pharmacists. For years, she had to get her supply from a veterinarian. She would then sell the drugs online or in her Toronto pharmacy.
I'm here to pick up prescription for Chase.
Sure.
The pricing was much better.
In the case of a common flea and tick medication, her price was 36% cheaper than a Toronto vet clinic. But in 2017, her business hit a roadblock. A drug company filed a complaint with the Ontario College of Pharmacists. Though it was ultimately dismissed, she felt it was part of an industry effort against her.
They want to keep vet medication only being sold in vet clinics.
Last October, the Competition Bureau of Canada said it was time for pet medicine manufacturers and veterinary distributors to end exclusive deals.
Our recommendation is to actually mandate the supply because we want to ensure that farmers are able to participate in the marketplace.
Okay.
Frankel hopes there is change.
If opening this up and competition drives prices lower, I'm all for that.
The challenge, though, is that the Competition Bureau can only make recommendations. So, Adrian, it's really up to businesses and the provinces to change the system.
Steve, when it comes to these sorts of shifts, what are you hearing from vets?
We spoke to the head of the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association. He said that vets are in the best position to sell and dispense because they know animal physiology. But consider that most pet medicines are actually derived from human medicines. So the pharmacists we spoke with say they're okay with doing a little bit of extra training on those animal-specific medicines. The head of the CVMA, though, comes back with the fact that this is part of their revenue, selling these medications. So if that's taken away from them, they may have to raise prices on other services.
That's interesting. All right, Stephen D'Souza, thanks very much.
Thank you.
You can watch the Fifth Estate's full investigation Friday on CBC Television and on CBC Gem. It's part of a joint investigative project, Marketplace and Radio-Canada, as they dig into Canada's changing pet health industry. Well, the Oscar nominations are out, and a Netflix musical is leading the pack. Why some say it is not worthy of the accolades. And Rosie's back with that issue.
Hey, Adrian, tonight we're going to talk about Trump's beef with Canada.
You can always become a state. Then if you're a state, we won't have a deficit. We won't have to tariff you.
Is Canada ready to take him on? Chantal, Althea, and Andrew join me to talk about that and more.
Hundreds of same-sex couples celebrated as they tied the knot in Bangkok on Thursday. After a decades-long fight, Thailand is now the first country in Southeast Asia to legalize same-sex marriage. Well, the list of Oscar nominees is out, and one Canadian filmmaker is conspicuously missing.
Here are the 10 nominees for Best Motion Picture of the Year.
The smash hit Dune Part 2 is up for the top honor, but not for its Quebecois filmmaker Denis Villeneuve. Actor Josh Brolin is among those lamenting this repeat snub. Villeneuve was also overlooked when his first Dune film was nominated.
For decades, there were reports of neglect and children dying or disappearing from this facility.
And the acclaimed Canadian film Sugarcane is up for Best Documentary Feature Film. Julian Brave Noisecat is a Suetmuc filmmaker who investigated the BC residential school his father attended. Journalist Emilia Pérez shares the nomination. But the film with the most nominations and the most buzz is a Spanish-language musical called Emilia Pérez. Eli Glasner shows us how it's broken new ground while also drawing criticism.
For our final category.
I cannot wait. Emilia Pérez.
Emilia Pérez.
There was a familiar refrain Thursday morning. Again and again, Emilia Pérez racking up 13 Oscar nominations, including Carla Sofia Gascon making history as the first openly transgender Best Actress nominee.
Are you English?
For her role in the Spanish-language musical about a drug cartel boss who undergoes gender-affirming surgery.
To have something that makes you go, what is this world?
This critic remembers the feeling of her first screening.
Dancing, Zoe Saldana. Yeah. It truly was one of the most refreshing movie experiences I've had.
But not everyone is embracing Emilia Pérez.
I was just truly aghast.
Sarah Ty Black is one of many critics in the trans community who see the film as a step backwards.
Just such a regression into these stereotypes about trans people, especially trans women, that we've seen on screen for decades.
They say the film's obsession with surgery and the way it frames Emilia's maleness is harmful. There's also concern about the depiction of Mexicans.
It's incredible because somehow the film has united Mexico. Everyone seems to hate it.
Though set mainly in Mexico, Emilia Pérez features few Mexican actors and was shot in a French studio. Now Selena Gomez's Spanish accent is going viral.
It's really bad, guys.
She's unintelligible. Literally, people are asking for subtitles.
This critic points to a scene where Emilia's son says she smells like mezcal and guacamole.
This is some Speedy Gonzalez level racism going on in this movie.
In a recent interview, Emilia Pérez's director apologized, saying cinema doesn't provide answers, it only asks questions. The Academy's response will be clear on awards night for a daring film that's both loved and derided. Eli Glasner, CBC News, Toronto.
Now let's break down the week in politics. Rosie's here with that issue.
At issue tonight, Trump's tariffs. Donald Trump is once again threatening Canada, this time as president.
Canada has been very tough to deal with over the years. You can always become a state. And if you're a state, we won't have a deficit, we won't have to tariff.
The Prime Minister says the government is ready to respond.
Canada will have a strong, robust response, because we don't want this, but we will respond if necessary.
How is the government responding to the threats, and will Canada have the right response? I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it all down tonight. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. Good to see everyone, and everyone back in the same time zone and their regular locations. Chantal, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of how the government is responding to these threats that continue, even if there isn't anything that's happened yet?
Well, I think we can dispose of the notion that bolstering forces at the border or doing something about fentanyl, which we should in any event, is going to solve this. That was yesterday's version or the day before. I also don't think that the realm of reason is going to work. What was the deficit, the trade deficit that the president quoted today? Over 300 billion. That's actually not at all within the realm of reality in any way, shape, or form. So I'm guessing the best they can do is to try to speak with one voice and see what happens and when it happens, because February 1st is now the date that's up in the air, but there are other reasons to believe it could come later. It could come, I don't know, tomorrow.
Yeah.
This is not an intelligent process. So the government of Canada and its allies and the premiers can only try to adjust from day to day to reality. And the reality is nothing has happened yet.
Right, but that chaos that he is sort of seeding in within this country and with political leaders, Andrew, is I don't know, is it doing what it's supposed to do, kind of getting everybody worried about things?
Well, I think we have to entertain the possibility that not only that this has nothing to do with fentanyl or migrants at the border, but also that it's not just a threat, that it's something he wants to do because he likes sowing chaos, because he likes tariffs, because he believes in it. Yeah. And certainly it seems to me the most prudent operating assumption is that this is not just a bluff and not just a threat, but he's going to do it. Yeah. And that whatever we do in response, and we should respond, may not succeed in getting him to lift it. In other words, we should be planning for the possibility that these tariffs are going to be around for a while, which means we need to be doing a lot more than just retaliating. We need to be thinking through what we have to do to preserve our competitiveness and preserve our economy in the face of this, because there's going to be a very strong incentive, and it's very clearly part of Trump's plan, is if you want to escape the tariff, then you got to invest in America. So that's signaling to everybody who's thinking of where they're going to locate investment. If we're going to have counter-arguments to that, tariffs are one factor, but they're not the be-all and the end-all. But one thing we've got to be addressing, and this was already a big issue in terms of the productivity crisis, the growth crisis, but it's now become times 9. It's now an existential crisis, is we've got to be able to say to people, there are reasons to invest in Canada, even with the tariffs. In other words, we've got to be a hyper-competitive economy, hyper-competitive tax rates, hyper-competitive investment climate. We cannot tolerate any of these things like interprovincial trade barriers anymore. We've got to be doing everything, at warp speed to make ourselves such a compelling and attractive place to invest and to do business that even with the tariffs, we can survive and prosper. So that's a much larger agenda than just what tariffs to put on or what export taxes do we put on. I'll just say finally, it sure would be nice to have a parliament sitting that could decide what kinds of measures we're going to put in place, not just in the short run, but for the longer run, instead of waiting, as we're going to be waiting, at least probably until June.
Althea?
I guess a few things. To Andrew's point, I absolutely agree. I think the key point is that we should not just want to court investments because of our proximity to the United States, which has been basically the offering that Canada has been displaying for generations. I will say that I think the government is actually seized with that issue. I'm not sure that they're doing enough, but it is on their agenda. Like the cabinet ministers at the retreat this week were talking about that. The premiers are talking about that. But what are they actually going to do about it? Because as we all know, I mean, my very first Canadian Federation meeting I was sent to cover the provinces talking to each other, the number one thing on the agenda was getting rid of interprovincial trade barriers, and that was more than 20 years ago. So
yes,
it's like
me too. Yeah.
this topic that we talk about and nothing ever gets done on.
Yeah.
Can I just say something quickly on that?
Yeah, then I want to let Althea finish. Yeah, quickly.
This might be the moment when we start thinking about things like the peace order and good government power. If we're dealing with this kind of threat to our economy, then different rules may apply and different mechanisms may be available to the feds to try to get rid of some of these trade barriers.
Okay, Althea, continue with your points there.
Yeah, I'd say 2 points. To Andrew's point about Parliament, when we left, Parliament was dysfunctional. It was, stuck in a filibuster that wasn't going anywhere and another one that was on the way. So I'm not actually convinced that Parliament's sitting. I would love to believe what Andrew is saying happens, but it doesn't really. It's a gigantic mess. Committees have turned into just partisan show where no tangible work seems to happen, at least in the lower house. In the upper house and the Senate, it's quite different. On the actual results, I think, we have been talking about this and the political leaders have been talking about this as like action that they are going to take. But frankly, it's action that we are all going to feel. Yes. And it would be helpful if they realize that Canadians are the ones who are going to be choosing to take some action. And that action, there may be things that we as a country will have to acknowledge. And we're starting to see some of the provinces think about this more actively. I think about British Columbia and Quebec, for example. If we are all in this together, and maybe there were things that are, some populations in certain parts of the country were unwilling to say, well, maybe we should build a pipeline going east, or maybe we should invest more money in an energy grid. Maybe now, the stakes have been painted, and we all realize that these are sacrifices that we're willing to do with each other because we don't, frankly, want to be swallowed up by the United States. And we don't want all that investment to drain south.
Yeah, it's beyond saying I'm not going to Florida this year. There's other big national projects we could tackle as a country. Chantal.
Or as in, I didn't have any orange juice this morning. That was one of the answers from François Legault this week. Possibly, probably, but I think in the immediate, I am with Althea on Parliament. I watched some of the interviews Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was giving this week. He was saying, bring back Parliament. In the same breath, he was saying, I want an election. Well, I'm not so sure that it's terribly helpful to bring back Parliament, to divert government's attention to trying not to have a non-confidence vote. And I do believe that Canadians, by and large, and based on polls, want to have a real choice in the next election, not a choice between Pierre Poilievre and nobody. So if that's the point of bringing back Parliament, I'm not convinced that it's a really constructive suggestion. As for an energy grid, a pipeline, I watched the Premier, I think, of Nova Scotia saying the federal government must approve Energy East. I'm sorry, there's no Energy East project on the book to approve. These projects would need to come from the industry. And I'm not convinced that they will be coming anytime soon. So the baby drill, let's copy this. Well, you need companies that believe that it's worthwhile to do this, and I'm not convinced that they will be coming to the fore tomorrow.
I only have about 20 seconds, Andrew.
I don't usually quote Pierre Poilievre, but you don't put the business of the nation on hold for 2 months while the Liberals sort out their stuff. They could have chosen a leader by any number of faster processes than this. They're taking their own sweet time doing it. That's fine from their purposes, but if it means you shut down Parliament for 2 months at a time of national crisis, basically an economic war has been declared on us, that's what you have parliaments for.
Okay. But you know what you did there? You gave me a beautiful segue. You guys are so good at your jobs. When we come back, we're going to look at the Liberal leadership race.
Christia's record of achievement speaks for itself.
I believe Mark Carney offers us the best tool.
So the candidates have sent in their paperwork, their money. The MPs are making endorsements. We'll look at how the race is shaping up next. At issue, the next Liberal leader. The deadline to enter the race has now passed. The candidates now making their pitches.
We need a Liberal Party of Canada for the next generation.
For me, a huge emphasis is going to be reviving the party, reviving the grassroots of the party.
We can put this economy back on track as a team.
So here to break down the race for the Liberals' next leader and next Prime Minister for some time anyway, Chantal, Andrea, and Althea. Althea, where do you think this race is headed from what you've seen this week? A lot of endorsements, certainly more for Mark Carney, but Chrystia Freeland has a bunch too. Where is this going?
Mark Carney has all the momentum. The CBC is located on Queen Street in Ottawa, and just across the street, as we are speaking, there are still MPs gathering. I'm told about 60 caucus members at an event for Mark Carney. One of those MPs actually crossed the street to tell me, this Cody Blois from Nova Scotia, a rural MP, to tell me that for the first time in 6 years, he was elected in 2019, he feels excited to be a Liberal, and that the people in his riding that, 6 months ago were calling him and telling him, oh, Cody, I'm sorry, but I cannot vote for you. I really don't like your leader, and what is your government doing? Have now signed up for Mark Carney and have donated and are signing up more members, and he feels, the excitement was palpable on his face. So that is happening. It is also really interesting to see some MPs who had announced that they were not going to run again change their mind and now think that their seats basically are winnable under Mark Carney's leadership. Helena in the GTA has said that she's going to run again. I'm told that there is, probably a few others who, definitely one other person, but I will let that person make their own announcement.
Decent of you.
There is a feeling among Liberals that they feel like they have new life. Ms. Freeland's campaign, I don't think anticipated the energy that would gravitate towards Mark Carney. She is trying to paint herself as a grassroots Liberal, which is interesting because she just joined the party in 2012 or 2013, was it? But so there's like this dynamic that I'm not actually sure really exists, because I do think Liberals are thirsty for a win. So I don't know how this, kind of focusing in on the grassroots and having conventions and having leadership reviews and formalized conventions. Last time I was at the Liberal convention, I was like one of 3 people in the room, and they didn't have quorum to have policy discussions at 8:30. So I'm not sure how many super eager grassroots Liberals there are. Anyways.
Yeah, and the excitement. Okay, great. Someone feels excited about their party, but there's no public opinion poll at this stage, Andrew, that has shown that anything has changed. We'll see, obviously, as the race goes on.
There's a poll. There's the Ecos poll. Frank Graves is online claiming that the Liberals have pulled within 5 points. We shall see. That's not being shown in any of the other polls.
No, it's not.
I'm struck by a couple of things. One is if you look at the people supporting Mark Carney, the MPs and cabinet ministers, they both seem more diverse than Chrystia Freeland supporters, but they also seem slightly to the left. He's got Stephen Guilbeault and Mélanie Joly behind him. She's got Anthony Housefather and Yvonne Baker, who wrote that centrist manifesto for the papers the other day. And they're both certainly rowing pretty hard away from the Trudeau legacy, at least so far as he pulled the party to the left. But she seems to be maybe rowing even harder than Carney is at that point. So it's an oddity that the outsider candidate seems to be more the voice of continuity at this point anyway. We'll see what else they come out with, than the longtime loyal lieutenant. It seems more like the change agent in that sense. But I think if you're a Liberal, you're looking at this and you're going, look, Carney has a lot of star power, could also really blow up. He does not speak good French, has never run for electoral office, hasn't wowed people in terms of his speech-making ability. We shall see. Real potential downside, but also probably more potential upside than Chrystia Freeland. He's got more of the star power, et cetera. And if you're a Liberal, you're kind of going, well, how much worse can the downside be? Yeah. We're flat on our backs anyway. Maybe take a flyer on this guy who at least can give us some hope.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't done any interviews yet, so that would also be, obviously he did interviews in previous jobs, but not, he did a little scrum today, but he hasn't done an interview yet, so that's significant. And I would suggest too, Chantal, that Chrystia Freeland has to row further away from Justin Trudeau because she's still very much attached to him in terms of the policies that she once loved and now is ditching.
Yes, but there's a limit to how much you can row when you're tied by a rope.
Yeah.
Let's be serious here. If you Google Chrystia Freeland, you're going to almost always see a picture of Justin Trudeau standing next to her or her standing next to him. And I think many Liberals are saying, well, if you didn't like Justin Trudeau, you probably won't like Chrystia Freeland. And that is a fact of life. I'm not sure that it's the left that is going with Mark Carney, but I think he is getting rewards for being someone who has tried to bring the financial side of climate policy to the fight on the climate front. And that is what brings people like Stephen Guilbeault or Wilkinson over to his side. I have to say a couple of things. One, I think Stephen Guilbeault's endorsement of Mark Carney is actually a service to the party as a whole. Why? Because it says you can walk away from the carbon tax on consumers without breaking up the party, basically. And that is very helpful. I also believe that the Liberal Party, looking at an election, is pretty happy to have Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney as the lead candidates because they fit what looks increasingly like the ballot box issue, which is who will best manage the Canada-U.S. relationship. Both of them are qualified for this, which means this is probably not the year for Karina Gould talking about party renewal, because that is the talk you talk when you're going to lose the election and rebuild. And I think the Liberals have started to believe they have a shot at maybe doing better in the election than they ever expected.
Wow. Althea.
I also don't agree on the left-right spectrum with Mark Carney. I think it's too early to tell because he also hasn't actually issued any policies, so we don't know how to gauge that. Because there are people like Cody Blois, for example, seeing as he was comfortable with me talking about him, insisted that I should talk about him. That he's not on the left side of the spectrum, but he did. Mark Carney got Patty Haydu today, so it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Okay, I got to leave it there. Thank you all. We'll talk about this many more times, both topics, I'm afraid, for the coming weeks. Thank you. That is it for At Issue on The National. We're going to continue this conversation and talk about a possible Ontario election being called next week. You can catch that on YouTube or the At Issue podcast. And now back to Adrienne in Toronto.
Thanks, Rosie. Next, you've heard of the Cookie Monster. Have you heard of the Cookie Moose?
Oh no, don't eat my cookies. It's my husband's birthday.
One woman's desperate attempt to scold it away. Next, in our moment. So this is Helga, and she comes to visit, apparently, one woman in Alaska nearly every day. It's a pretty rare, very special bond, to be sure. But recently, there's one thing that challenged their unique connection: birthday cookies. So tonight, Helga's moosey mischief is our moment.
Oh no, don't eat my cookies. Oh, Helga.
Helga and her mom, they come and play in the sprinklers.
Hi, you booped me.
So I've known Helga since she was born.
You booped me.
When I see her, I just sit and talk to her, just like she's a human.
Hello. Hi. How's it going?
My husband's favorite cookies are no-bake cookies. And in Alaska, everybody uses outside as the fridge. So I just put them together, set them outside, and came back, and Helga was eating them.
Oh no, don't eat my cookies. It's my husband's birthday.
And I was talking to her like I talked to my cat.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
She knocked the whole pan off, ate the rest of them, and then walked off, and I'm assuming she took a nap.
Oh!
When my husband came home, I'm like, babe, I made your favorite cookies, but the moose ate them. And he's like, no, she didn't. And I was like, no, I swear to God, I got it on video. And so he watched it. He's like, oh my God, that's hilarious. I mean, what are you going to do? It's a 1,000-pound animal.
Helga!
Yeah, I suppose all you can do is ask politely, as she did. And Tara says, listen, she knows it is illegal there to intentionally feed moose. So she's very careful about not leaving food around. But, you know, sometimes you slip. And she did. But she says, listen, please don't get too close to moose. But this one is her friend, so she feels like she's okay. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.